Let's start with a hard truth. The personality trait that hands your power to everyone else is the intense need to be seen as nice. Now, let's deconstruct that. We're talking about a system of control so subtle, most people don't even know they're trapped inside of it. It doesn't operate with force. It operates through our own deep-seated, very human desire to be liked. So today, we're not just talking about being helpful. We are pulling back the curtain on the hidden power dynamic of people-pleasing.
Just think about that paradox for a second. The very quality you work so hard to cultivate, to build harmony and connect with people, being nice, is the exact mechanism that's draining your autonomy, your energy, and your time. Every single time you prioritize someone else's comfort or their convenience over your own genuine needs, you are making a quiet transaction. You're surrendering a piece of your power. Look, this isn't about genuine kindness. That comes from a place of strength and choice. This is about a compulsion for approval that ends up becoming your greatest vulnerability.
So, this brings us to the big question, right? How does this simple, totally understandable desire for acceptance get so twisted that it becomes a system of self-sabotage? How does wanting things to be smooth and peaceful lead you to a state of just chronic exhaustion, resentment, and this profound sense of emptiness? We're going to dig into this dynamic not as some character flaw, but as a predictable, almost mechanical system. And it's a system that once you understand it, you can absolutely dismantle.
So here's our roadmap for today. We've touched on the nice paradox. Now, we're going to dive into what that directly causes, the exhaustion loop. From there, we'll dissect the machine itself, the compliance engine, and look under the hood at the psychology of control. Then, and this is key, we shift into action with the strategic boundary protocol, all leading up to your final power shift.
First things first, let's talk about the lived experience, what this actually feels like. We're calling it the exhaustion loop. And this isn't some abstract theory. It's that familiar, gut-level feeling of being constantly stretched thin, of running on fumes, not just for a day or a week, but as your permanent state of being. To find the solution, we have to accurately diagnose the symptoms first.
And you see, these aren't separate issues. They are all part of an interconnected downward spiral. The chronic exhaustion, it's not just physical. It's the deep mental fatigue from constantly running these social calculations, trying to predict and manage everyone else's needs and reactions. This constant external focus, well, it leads directly to emotional imbalance. Your own feelings get pushed down until they either go numb or they just explode in ways that seem totally out of proportion. And from there, a sense of profound helplessness starts to set in. Because you've outsourced your decision-making to please others, you feel like you have no control over your own life. This creates decision paralysis. When a choice is finally yours to make, you just freeze. I mean, how can you possibly know what you want when you've trained yourself to only consider what others want? And the ultimate cost of this whole loop? A complete loss of identity. You start to exist only in terms of how useful you are to other people. The question, who am I when no one needs anything, becomes terrifying because the system ensures you never have the quiet space or the energy to find out.
So, what is fueling this entire engine? It's a process called fear conditioning. See, somewhere along the line, your brain learned a critical and deeply damaging equation: conflict equals danger. Disappointing someone equals rejection, and rejection feels like annihilation. Now, this isn't a rational thought. It's a conditioned, automatic response that's been wired right into your nervous system. A disappointed look from a colleague or a frustrated tone from a loved one gets perceived by your brain as a greater threat than your own burnout. Your fundamental need for self-preservation, for rest, for space, for your own goals, is consistently overridden by this powerful, primal fear of disconnection. And let's be crystal clear, this is not a weakness. It's a survival strategy that has just outlived its usefulness and is now causing active harm.
Okay, so now we understand the internal feeling and the psychological fuel. Let's get analytical. We're going to pop the hood and look at the actual mechanics of this trap. This isn't just random chaos. It is a predictable, repeatable system that we can map out and understand step by step.
We call this system the attachment-based compliance loop. Really, you can just think of it as a behavioral engine, and it has one primary purpose: to help you avoid the sharp, intense pain of potential rejection or abandonment. And the fuel it burns to achieve this goal, well, it's your own energy, your own time, your own boundaries. It's a machine built to trade your long-term well-being for the feeling of short-term emotional safety.
And here's exactly how that engine runs, in 4 distinct stages. First, you get the trigger. That familiar gut-level jolt of fear that you'll be disliked or seen as difficult or just left out. This fear immediately prompts the action. You accommodate.
You say yes when you mean no. You offer up your weekend when you're already exhausted. This is boundary collapse happening in real time. The immediate result is the consequence, a reciprocity violation. You give 100 units of energy or time or effort and you get back, what, 5 units of appreciation, maybe? And this imbalance leads directly to the final stage, the feedback loop. Your initial anxiety isn't actually solved. In fact, it's reinforced. The lack of genuine reciprocity quietly confirms your deepest fear, that your value is conditional on your service. And this just primes the pump for the next trigger, and the whole cycle repeats, getting stronger and more ingrained each time.
Now, listen closely. This is really important. The entire transaction of power happens in stage 2, in that precise moment of accommodation. The second you decide that their request, their comfort, or their need is more important than your own need for rest or integrity or focus, you have just transferred control. You've handed them the leverage. It's a silent negotiation that you lose by default simply because you've already decided your own needs aren't even a valid currency in the exchange. And this repeated forfeiting of your own needs leads to a state we call boundary collapse. And this isn't a passive condition, it's actively broadcasting a signal to everyone around you. That signal says, I am a low-cost, low-friction resource. Your high availability, always answering the text, always saying yes, combined with your low relational cost, never asking for much in return, never creating conflict, makes you a strategic asset for anyone who's looking for the path of least resistance. It's not that people are necessarily malicious, it's that you have, through your own actions, made yourself the easiest, most frictionless option available for them to get exactly what they want.
So we see the mechanics of the loop, but why is it so powerful? Why is it so ridiculously hard to break out of? Well, to understand that, we need to go deeper and look at the psychological principles that this whole engine exploits. These are the leverage points that keep you locked inside the cycle.
There are 2 deep psychological pressures at play here. First, the system weaponizes your natural human need for approval. It takes this need and it cranks it up to 11 until you completely outsource your sense of self-worth. Your value is no longer an internal stable thing, it becomes a fluctuating stock price that's determined by the daily opinions of others. That is an incredibly fragile and exhausting way to live. Second, it fundamentally misunderstands and misapplies the principle of reciprocity. You operate on this belief that by giving and giving and giving, you're building up a bank of social credit, and that others will feel obligated to pay you back. But the psychological reality is often the exact opposite. Your constant low-cost giving doesn't signal high value, it signals low value. It doesn't create obligation in other people, it creates a sense of entitlement. They just come to expect it.
And this, right here, reveals the chemical hook that keeps you trapped. It's a powerful psychological principle called intermittent reinforcement. The best way to think about it is like a slot machine. It doesn't pay out every single time you pull the lever, right? It pays out just often enough and at completely unpredictable times to keep you feeding coins into the machine. Well, in the people-pleasing loop, the occasional, unpredictable thank you, the rare moment of praise, or that brief feeling of being indispensable, that's the small jackpot. That tiny, fleeting emotional reward is powerful enough to condition you to endure long, draining periods of self-sacrifice, always hoping the next yes will finally bring the validation you're craving. It is a brilliant and honestly a brutal form of behavioral conditioning.
So this brings us to the essential strategic shift that you have to make. On the left is the current state. You're operating as a low-cost resource. Your actions are driven by anxiety. Your time is immediately available to anyone who asks. You consistently sacrifice your boundaries. The goal on the right is to start operating as a high-value asset. Here, your actions are driven not by fear, but by your own values and your own conscious choices. Your time and energy are finite resources, and they are strategically allocated. You don't just have boundaries, you actively defend them. And listen, this isn't about becoming selfish or mean. It's about a core economic principle. Scarcity creates value. By making your resources strategically less available, you fundamentally increase their perceived worth and the respect they command.
All right, we've analyzed the problem, the engine, and the psychology. Now we shift from diagnosis to action. Because all this knowledge is totally useless without application. We're going to install a new piece of operating software, a clear, actionable protocol designed to dismantle this entire system from the inside out.
Your very first tactical step is learning to recognize the signal for action. And here it is. It's that brief, hot flash of resentment you feel in your gut the instant the word yes leaves your mouth, when every fiber of your being wanted to say no. For years, you've probably interpreted this feeling as a personal failing, a sign that you're not being nice enough. We need to reframe that completely. That feeling is not a flaw. It is a data point. It is a critical alert from your internal guidance system screaming at you that a boundary has just been violated. It is your signal to act.
Now, the protocol itself is a simple two-step process. The first tactical move is to delay and decouple. See, the compliance loop thrives on speed and emotional reflexes. Your automatic yes is a conditioned response. To break it, you have to introduce a time delay. This creates the essential space to decouple your decision from the immediate emotional pressure of the moment. The second move, once you have that space, is to define and defend. This is where you rationally decide what your boundary is, and then you calmly communicate and hold that line.
Here is your primary tool for step 1. This simple phrase is one of the most powerful tools you can possibly possess. Let me check my calendar and get back to you. Now notice what this does. It doesn't say no. It doesn't create any immediate conflict, but it instantly breaks the compliance loop. It yanks the decision out of that high-pressure emotional space of the moment and moves it into a low-pressure, rational space where you are back in control. It buys you time. And in this game, time is the currency of choice. This script is your first and most important line of defense.
And here is your tool for step 2. After you have used your delay to rationally decide that the answer is no, you need a script to defend that boundary. A highly effective one is, unfortunately, that's outside of my bandwidth right now. This is a perfect boundary statement. It's not an apology. It's not an excuse that can be debated or argued with. It is not an invitation to negotiate. It is a calm, neutral, professional statement of fact. It closes the conversation respectfully without creating unnecessary conflict, and it is completely non-negotiable.
So let's bring all of this together. We have journeyed from understanding the deep-seated fear that drives this behavior, all the way through the mechanics of the trap to the tactical scripts you can use to dismantle it. This entire process is about facilitating one fundamental transformation, shifting your core operating system from a desperate external search for approval to a quiet, confident reliance on your own internal autonomy.
And this is the ultimate truth of this entire dynamic. Every single time you say an insincere yes to someone else, you are casting a vote. You might think you're voting for harmony, or for being liked, or for keeping the peace, but what you are actually voting for is the continued neglect of your own needs, your own projects, your own energy, and your own well-being. The real cost isn't just your time. The true cost of saying yes to everyone else is that with each one of those yeses, you are forced to say a silent, corrosive no to yourself.
And so I will leave you with this final central question. For years, the compliance loop has operated on the subconscious assumption that other people hold this power, that your value is something they grant to you in exchange for your service and your compliance. But after everything we've uncovered today, the question you have to now ask yourself is this: who really has the power to define your value? The answer, and the responsibility that comes with it, is yours and yours alone.